For All the Jural Assemblies Part 24, The American Government by Anna von Reitz. Our American government created the federal government. That may be big news for some people reading this, because generations of Americans have been purposefully left in the dark and conditioned to glaze over when any topic of history is discussed, much to their detriment. Our American government precedes the existence of the federal government by over 10 years and in part, by more than 30 years, and it far exceeds the federal government in authority, power, and standing. Even now. By Maxim of Law, the creation is never greater than the creator. Our American government is meant to control and use the federal government as an instrumentality, and that instrumentality was never meant to serve the interests of any foreign government, though thanks to disloyal politicians and corrupt generals, it has served the interests of both the British Empire and the Holy Roman Empire to the detriment of our states and people. The constitutions were used to create all three branches of the federal government: federal, territorial, and municipal. When you understand that fact, you are prepared to hear, perhaps for the first time in your lives, that there are three constitutions, not one. The actual federal constitution is the Constitution for the United States of America. The territorial constitution is the Constitution of the United States of America. The municipal constitution is the Constitution of the United States. These entities were specifically created to exercise 19 of our own enumerated powers for us. That is to say, all branches of the federal government were created to act as subcontractors to do work for us in foreign jurisdictions, and to provide us and our states with stipulated services on a mutual basis. The work to be done by the three branches of the federal government falls into three categories: 1. The general business of this country in the realm of international commerce; 2. The military and territorial property management business which was farmed out to the British territorial United States; and 3. The municipal business which was left in the care of the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire. Very little mention of our actual American government is made in any of the constitutions, for the simple reason that we and our American government are not the subject of these venerable documents. The constitutions each concern themselves with structurally setting up and delineating the rights and duties of a specific branch of the new federal government and say little or nothing about our pre-existing American government which is doing the set-up. We are referenced in the preamble of each federal constitution as "we, the people," and we are implied throughout the Bill of Rights addendum. We appear strongly in Amendment X, and in tiny bits and pieces of almost apocryphal nature elsewhere, but we, and our American government are simply not the subject of the constitutions. For this reason, people who are looking to the constitutions to provide information about our American government are bound to be disappointed, and the period of time and the documents related to our formal setup are going to be outside the purview of such seekers. The roots of our American government go back to 1756 and the onset of what is called in America the French and Indian War, and which is elsewhere known as the 30 Years' War in Europe. It was in that conflict that Americans like George Washington tasted what it was like to be used as mercenary troops by the British. You fight the war for them, and then you pay for it, too. It was also during that time period and just prior to it, that Washington, the largest private landowner in America and a direct close relative of the British king, became aware of the disastrously limited treaties the British had made with various native tribes. According to those treaties, the colonists were never supposed to encroach upon the land beyond the Cumberland Gap. Washington had seen the richness of the Kentucky wilderness and the Ohio borders. He knew that the colonies would need to expand and that those treaties had to be overcome, and it would be to the advantage of both the colonists and the British king if they were dispensed with. But how? By a change of government. It would no longer matter what the Great Father across the water said in his treaties with the natives, if he was supplanted by a violent revolution and the rise of a new government headed by the colonists, albeit a government secretly loyal to the king and to British interests in America, a government headed by Washington and internationalists like Franklin, who supported the even then globalist agenda of the Holy See. To put it bluntly, then as now, Britain conspired to avoid its responsibilities and maintain its good name, yet retain control, by installing a puppet government. Ours. Then as now, greed and deceit were fundamental components of the scheme. This was the 1776 version of the New Deal, in which the natives lost their treaties and King George regained access to a whole continent, all without dirtying his gloves or soiling his reputation by obviously and openly defaulting on his earlier treaties. Washington would do the defaulting for him and be none the worse the wear, because Washington never agreed to the native treaties in the first place. So let's take a look at how this new American government was structured and when and how it was created and exactly who we, the people, are. There are three principal jurisdictions of law that were defined and set up by the Holy See hundreds of years before the American Revolution: air, land, and sea. Our American government was set up on this pattern, too, with a separation of duties and functions according to air, land, and sea jurisdictions of the law. During the 5 years 1776 to 1781, numerous new entities, which we would now call governmental units, were set up. First, the original colonies were redefined as landed estates and formed a union of these estates by unanimous declaration as of July 1, 1776, published July 4, 1776, known as the United States. Then, shortly thereafter, September 9, 1776, the estates created states for themselves, another level of governmental organization and another union of these states called the United States of America. Thus we have the people of the soil, county, jurisdiction populating their estates, for example, Virginia, and we have their union of soil jurisdiction states doing business as the United States. Each such state forms a separate nation of people living within its borders, Virginians, New Yorkers, and so on. We have the same people operating in the international jurisdictions of land and sea, international capacity, as people and as states, for example, Pennsylvania, and we have their union of states doing business as the United States of America. Each state forms a separate nation for the purposes of international business, composed of the people living within its borders, and together they operate as the United States of America. Thus, finally, we know who we, the people, are, the living population of the estates doing international business as states separately and as the United States of America mutually. This is the level of American government which gave rise to the three branches of federal government and which defined the structure, duties, and obligations of the parties under the constitutions. There was one other union of governmental units formed as part of the initial set-up of our American government, just as the states created the states to function for them in the realm of international affairs on both land and sea, the states chartered incorporated states of states to function for them in the realm of global affairs and commerce, that is, business conducted between two incorporated entities. The states thus formed their states of states to function for them in the global jurisdiction of the air and specifically, in the jurisdiction of international commerce. This then created a union of states known as the States of America under the Articles of Confederation, effective March 1, 1781, more than 6 years prior to the adoption of any constitution. This, then, is the American government which existed prior to any constitution. The United States, a union of geographically defined soil jurisdiction states formed by and deriving from the original colonies. The United States of America, a union of geographically defined states formed to serve the people and states in the international jurisdictions of land and sea. This is the original federation of states. The States of America, a union of inchoate, chartered, and incorporated states of states formed by the states to serve the states and people of the United States of America in the global jurisdiction of commerce. Each state of state, such as the state of New York, is called a Confederate state, and the union they form is established under the Articles of Confederation. This is the original Confederacy or Confederation of States. All of this was organized during the height of the Revolutionary War and long before the existence of any constitutions. This is the American government that created the federal government. Please notice that two of the American unions and their member states are geographically defined, actual and factual entities with borders, and physical assets. The United States claims and controls the top 6 inches of soil. This is our national jurisdiction and the instrumentality responsible for it. The United States of America claims and controls the land underlying the soil, as well as exercising the duties and rights owed to the states in the international jurisdiction of the sea. This is our international jurisdiction and the instrumentality responsible for it. The third union of states, known as the States of America, is composed of members like the state of New York, which are not defined geographically. They exist only on paper and are chartered by our states as incorporated entities engaged in international commerce. This is our global jurisdiction and the instrumentality that is supposed to be responsible for it, but thanks to legal chicanery and fraud following the so-called American Civil War, this Union of States has been mothballed since 1868, and our American government has been hobbled ever since. Part of your mission as members of your state Jural Assemblies will be to recharter your federal states of states, like the state of Georgia and the state of Maine, to take over the general business functions of the federal government. Please hit subscribe, like, share, embed, and get ready for many more Anna von Reitz videos.